everybody, welcome to Learn with Steph. This is one of the videos as part of our Lessons in Law series. The focus is on OCR A Level Law, but it will be useful to anybody studying law. If you like the videos, please do subscribe and press the like button at the bottom. Hello, this is the second lesson on general elements of criminal liability, focusing on the mens rea section. So this is specifically for OCR, and today we're going to look at strict liability, what offences are strict liability, how you can tell if an offence is strict liability, and how they're applied. We're going to finish with looking at a short scenario. So first of all, what are strict liability offences? Well, in simple terms, these are offences that you don't have to prove mens rea. So just doing the offence is enough. You don't have to prove intention or recklessness or any thought on the case of the defendant. In fact, the defendant might have tried their hardest not to do it, and they would still be guilty of an offence. And it includes things like parking offences, polluting the waterways, sale of alcohol to minors, and health and safety regulations. So we're going to go through a few cases now. You don't need to know them all, but it will help you in understanding what offences are strict liability. So first of all, Smedley's v. Breed. Here, a caterpillar was found in a tin of peas, and the factory was actually very clean, very careful during the manufacturing process, but the factory was still guilty of breaking food hygiene regulations because this was a strict liability offence. Harrow v. Shah. Here, a lottery ticket was sold to somebody under the age of 16, and even though the shop had trained its staff to check ID, the fact that they sold a lottery ticket to somebody under the age of 16 made it an offence because it's purely strict liability. Callow v. Tilstone, a butcher, he received some meat. But he was a bit suspicious, so he took it to the vet to check to see if it was fit for human consumption. And the vet passed it fit. However, it was actually not fit for human consumption. And even though the butcher did everything to check the fitness of the meat, he was still guilty of selling unfit meat because it was a strict liability offence. And Blake. Here, somebody was running a pirate radio station, and whilst they were broadcasting, they accidentally blocked the emergency services signals. They didn't know they were doing this. They didn't want to block it. They just did. So they were still guilty. So these are just examples of strict liability offences. Moving on. What type of offences are strict liability? Well, hopefully you could answer this yourself. The key word here is regulatory. So strict liability offences tend to be regulatory offences, such as building regulations, health and safety regulations, motoring regulations. All of these would be strict liability offences. But how can we tell? How can we tell if a criminal offence is one of strict liability? Well, actually this works on what are called the Gammon rules, and this case of Gammon involved building regulations. Okay, and during that case they discussed this whole concept of strict liability. So first of all, it might be clear in the definition of an offence that the offence is not one of strict liability because there may be mens rea words in the statute or in the offence definition, such as it might say knowingly or dishonestly or maliciously. And to be perfectly honest, most recent statutes make it quite clear if an offence is to be treated as strict liability. There's also a presumption that all true crimes are not strict liability. So all true crimes require proof of mens rea. And an offence is likely to be truly criminal if it carries a serious penalty, such as imprisonment, and perhaps a social stigma. But this isn't always the case. And the case of Sweet v. Parsley illustrates this nicely. And here, a teacher rented a house to some students, and the students were smoking cannabis, or it may have been marijuana, but anyway, they were smoking drugs. And the teacher, Stephanie Sweet, the teacher didn't know that they were smoking drugs. And at first she was convicted because it was decided that the offence was one of strict liability. Well, of course, this sort of drugs offence, particularly as she was a teacher, carries quite a penalty. She'd lose her job. There's a big social stigma. And the court said, actually, no. All true crimes require mens rea and are not strict liability offences. So be careful here. Sweet v. Parsley does not illustrate an offence of strict liability. It illustrates the presumption that true crimes are not strict liability. And then Gammon rules also stated that the types of offences that are strict liability will usually have the following aims. They will be there for the welfare of society. They are public safety rules. They create greater vigilance. So, for instance, welfare of society is where the offence might involve an issue of social concern. So, covering potential dangers to the public, such as the selling of foods, building regulations, protection of minors, so gambling and alcohol and drugs for minors. Public safety is the promotion of greater care over matters of public safety, such as food hygiene regulations. And Blake, the pirate radio case would come under here. And then greater vigilance. The aim of this is to make the law more effective. It means strict liability offences often act as a deterrent. So speeding offences act as a deterrent, health and safety, building regulations. So you can see how they interlink here, but it's a good way of thinking about health and safety, good way of thinking about strict liability laws. Let's have a look at a scenario. So here the scenario is identify and explain any offences that may have been committed. Tom runs a cafe bar. He has given a customer food poisoning by serving them out-of-date prawns. He was assured by the seller of the prawns that they were fresh and fit for human consumption. Tom also serves a customer alcohol without realising he was already drunk. Tom's 16-year-old son, James, is the bar's DJ. He broadcasts music illegally over the radio, which interferes with emergency services radio frequency. James's friend works in a betting shop and allows him to place a bet on a horse. His employer, Marcus, has warned him not to allow underage gambling. The thing to do for this scenario is to identify the potential offences. So very quickly, reread that scenario and identify all the potential offences. And I think you'll be able to see they're all strict liability ones. So hopefully identified that Tom has served out-of-date prawns. So there's something to do with food hygiene, food standards there. He's served a customer who's already drunk. So an offence involving the selling of alcohol. You've got James broadcasting music illegally and blocking the emergency signals. And then, of course, you've got underage gambling. So the next thing to do is, can you link any of those scenario offences to actual cases? So is there a case for each of them that you can remember? And hopefully you've thought Callow v Tilstone, because it's quite similar to the butcher, as the butcher was also checked to make sure that they were fit for human consumption. So there's a really, really good link there. And of course you've got Blake with the pirate radio station, and Harrow v Shah for the underage gambling. And then for the green, the serving a customer, you might have a reference to the welfare of society or public safety there, because of course you've got alcohol controls. And hopefully you'll be able to see that in these scenarios, the perpetrator, there was no mens rea, yet the fact that they did the offence means that they are all guilty. So we've covered most of mens rea. Our next session, transferred malice. If you like this video, do press like, feel free to leave a comment, and do subscribe to my channel for more videos. Thank you for listening. That brings us to the end of this lesson in law. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like it and subscribe to find more videos. Bye.